Today on Travelin, we're experiencing a vintage Christmas. We're in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at Strawbery Banke. I'm your host, Erin Berry, and come and join me for a candlelight stroll. I'm here with Amy Moy, Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for coming. We're so excited to have you here at the Candlelight Stroll.
How long has the Strawbery Banke site been around?
Strawbery Banke Museum itself started in 1958. There was a group of local women who were really concerned about watching the homes in this community be ripped down and being torn down, and garden apartments and retail stores being put up. And so it was a grassroots effort to preserve these homes. So the museum was started in 1958.
The actual site, when does that date back to?
Our oldest building, the Sherburne House, is from 1695, and we have a real wide range of homes and different various building times throughout the history. So oldest 1695, and we interpret history through the 1940s. This community has fantastic history, and what Strawbery Banke Museum is all about, what makes it so unique, it's the story of this one neighborhood over 4 centuries of time. So this one neighborhood of immigrants, of working class people, of people who were of more means, whether they were wealthy colonial governors or merchants, they all lived here. They all worked here, they raised families here. And so what this museum is about taking those stories of those people who actually walked these streets, lived in these homes, and built their lives here, and telling those stories. And so there's lots of different histories here, whether it's the story of the Shapiro family coming in and immigrating from the Ukraine and building their lives here and learning American culture as they still keep kosher in their home, or whether it's Governor Ichabod Goodwin, who was the Civil War era governor who lived here, and the stories of his life and his family, or any number of working class people who shopped at the Abbott's store, who sent their children to school here. So it's all of those stories, and there's so many of them that make Strawbery Banke unique and really have so much history here. And again, it's 4 centuries of one neighborhood over time that's depicted here.
Where did the name come from?
The name Strawbery Banke Museum actually came from the first English settlers to this area. They came to Portsmouth in 1623. And they were sailing up the Piscataqua River looking for a great place for trade. And they actually came upon the banks of the Piscataqua River here and saw this wild profusion of strawberries right along the banks. And so really fitting is that we named the museum Strawbery Banke after what the first English settlers saw here. And the spelling is a little different and it catches people off, but it's the old English spelling of strawberry and bank.
Why is the museum so important?
I think that Strawbery Banke Museum is so important, and the fact that nothing is recreated here. Everything you see here is as it has been, whether it's the 1695 Sherburne House or the Shapiro House, which is depicted to 1919, or the 18th century home of Captain John Wheelwright. These homes are sitting on original foundations. They weren't moved in here. We don't have a cute little church or a community school because it wasn't here. And so it tells the real stories of real people that lived here. And to be able to depict all of that in one place is pretty unique. To be able to come through and step into one building and it's the 17th century, and then the next you're in the Abbott store and it's the 1940s, and you're talking about wartime rationing, and do you have your ration book to be able to buy the things in the store, and is it the right day to use your stamps? Really, I think the authenticity of the museum and to have that piece of history, I think as historians we know that the best way to inform the future is to learn about the past. At some point, there's nothing new under the sun. These stories have been told before, but we have a lot to learn about the people that called this area home. We look at the Victory Garden that we have here at the museum, and it's extremely relevant in the past few years. We see this great resurgence of people wanting to know where their food comes from, and knowing that your vegetables weren't on a truck for 3,000 miles, and that you can grow this in your own backyard. And again, that's something new that we're seeing, and it's a hot trend. It was from the 1940s and even before. So we really see a lot of what happens here at Strawbery Banke Museum that has a new form in current life. And so I think that there's so much about what we know today that we can learn from the past, and that's what we really have here, is so many different centuries that we can learn from.
What is the Cotton Tenant House?
The Cotton Tenant House is this fantastic building here at Strawbery Banke Museum, built in 1824 by Leonard Cotton, who has his own fantastic story. He was, in his younger years, spending time on a merchant ship that actually sort of got waylaid, and he ended up winning the Mexican lottery and won a grand sum of $15,000, which in the late 1700s is a lot of money, and I think even today $15,000 is a lot of money. But he came back to Portsmouth, and his mother was a widow, and so he came back to Portsmouth and bought a lot of property and was a wonderful landlord. So he really provided homes for the people that didn't have a lot of money, for widows, and was at one point in Portsmouth the largest landlord in town. And so we have the Leonard Cotton Tenant House, which stands restored on the exterior only. In 2008, we sort of finished the exterior restoration, but if you walk through that house, it's not finished on the inside. We've put floors in so people can actually walk through, but it's a chance for people to see one of these houses not complete and what it looks like when we start the restoration process. So you can walk through the kitchen and you can see layers and layers of wallpaper. And how do you know which one is original? And you can see fireplaces that have been boarded up when fireplaces were no longer really used as the main component for heating the home. And so it's this really wonderful opportunity, and you see the staircase, and that's not finished, and the paint is peeling, and you can see the shiplath underneath in the exposed walls. And we really encourage people to come through that house and help us decide what that house should be interpreted to. What story should it tell? Should it tell the story of widows or of immigrants who were living there because it was an affordable place to live? Should it tell the Leonard Cotton story? Of all the hundreds of people that lived in that one home, which story do you pick? You have 150 years of time that has lapsed. What story do you pick? And so we ask people to come through. They can look at all the data that our curatorial team has, so whether it's probate inventories or the architecture of the house or what we know of from history, use all the same resources that we have and really help us decide what story that house should tell.
Where do you get your funding for restoration?
Funding for the restorations is really important for the museum. These houses that are in various states of needing assistance, it's a long process and it's an expensive process. So we work with a lot of different foundations. We apply for grants, some loans from community heritage and investment programs. So there's a lot of different avenues that we really try to go after to get the needed funding to restore some of these buildings. Again, it's a really long process to get the funding in place, and then the actual restoration of the buildings as well. There's paint analysis that has to go on to determine what color the exterior of the building is going to be. Wallpaper analysis, if there's still wallpaper on the interior of the houses. We look at the original architectural drawings of the houses to restore it back to its original structure. And there's a lot that has to go into trying to make sure the foundations are secure, replacing glass, hard to find 17th century glass. You can't get it at your local hardware store. So it's a long process of sort of salvage and trying to find these pieces and parts and hardware and a lot that goes into the restoration.
What are some of the things kids can experience in the Discovery Center?
The Discovery Center is a wonderful place for kids right here at Strawbery Banke Museum, and it's really this place where everything is hands-on. I think so many times kids will go into museums and they read all those signs, or their parents tell them, don't touch. Just look with your eyes and don't touch. And I think even as adults that doesn't appeal to us. And so at the Discovery Center, everything is about touching and playing, but it's sort of learning through the playing with toys. So you come into the Discovery Center and the first room you come to is sort of toys through time. And through looking at original toys, whether it's simple blocks and shapes that kids through the 17th or 18th century might have stacked and played with, or you move up into Lincoln logs or Rector sets or pull toys, and kids can see the themes that you may have started with original blocks that weren't colorful and weren't very pretty, but could still build with, to Lincoln logs, to Rector sets. So that concept, that toy, through time is the same, but it's just the packaging changes, the color changes, and it gets a little bit more sophisticated. But I think kids can make those connections. And then they'll walk through into the kitchen. One side of the kitchen is from the 1940s, the other side of the kitchen, through the late 1700s. So you see in the late 1700s, there's an open hearth there. Food is in the form of whole fish and whole apples in a basket. And the table is wooden, and you have wooden colonial chairs sitting there. And you look directly across, and you're in the 1940s. And the table is aluminum. And it's got that great, want to look like Formica top with the great aluminum chairs, and you've got this big cast iron stove. It's not cooking in the hearth, it's cooking in a stove now, and you have a stove top. You go into the pantry and food comes in containers and packages. And so kids, can get out, they can look at that fish that they've got or that package of food and start to put together the concept of, not a whole lot has changed. The families still gather around the table for their meals and prepare their meals, but the way the food came or the way it was packaged or the table that you sit at might change. And then we have a community room. And kids can, on one side, again, you have sort of the late 1700s, and you have coins and script money. And again, food is coming in whole forms, and you would buy it by the bushel or the basket. The other side of the store, you're plucking your products off the shelf, whether it's cereal or flour in a sack. And you're playing with modern money, or you're looking at school books that kids would have had hundreds of years ago, and the lessons they learned aren't that different than what they're learning in school now. And so it's really a great place for kids to play and to touch and to interact with their families, where everything they can do is sit in the chairs, pick up the food, touch everything. And I think it's a more meaningful way to learn about history than sort of running behind the velvet ropes where everyone's saying, shh, don't touch.
What can people see when they visit the Victorian Children's Garden?
The Victorian Children's Garden is this wonderful, whimsical place for kids. And everything about the Victorian Children's Garden was designed for children. And so the first thing that I think adults quickly notice is that all of the plant identification is at child level. And so if an adult wants to read it, they're going to have to bend over, but it's perfect level for children. And then there's also pictures on the identification of plants. And so it's easy for kids to identify. And then we also have a fairy garden. And so we really is built on this idea of the fairy house tours and fairy gardens. And we'll have kids come through and they can take materials and flowers from the gardens, make a salad for the fairies. They put them right on seashell plates, or they might make a tea, an herb tea, for the fairies in the garden. There's a tree house that they can play in. And there's a great part of the garden where it really identifies plants where they get their names from. And so whether it's cat nine tails or foxglove, any of these plant names that have animals based in it, as short as will show the children how those plants got their names. And so again, it's a really interactive place for kids. And what we're really trying to do is to teach kids things that are in their own backyard. We know that there's a statistic that says children can identify less than 10 plants and animals in their own backyards, but over 1,000 corporate logos. And so there's a dramatic shift of what children are learning and the images and the information that's coming at them. And so the Victorian Children's Garden is one small way to get kids excited about growing plants, learning where their food comes from, or even just something as simple and fun as making a salad for a fairy. We do have master gardeners from the UNH cooperative system that come in and teach these lessons to the children. They can learn about composting. They can help us turn the compost pile. They can make their own flower pots and take home seeds from the gardens here and start their own gardens at home. And it's just this really great way to get kids excited about the things that they can grow in their own backyard.
Coming up in 2012, you have something called the Passion for Fashion. What do we have to look forward to?
Passion for Fashion is something I think that all of the staff and everyone that we have involved with the project so far are very excited about. And here at the museum, in our collections, we have wonderful textiles. We have night dresses from girls, or shifts, or sailor pants for boys. We have a beautiful wedding dress. We have some wonderful gowns. But in the depiction of the houses currently, a lot of these materials aren't in them. So they're sitting in the collection center where the public doesn't have access to them. But they're incredible pieces of fashion. And we have great shoes. And we can learn a lot about the people who purchased these items or wore these items by learning about the items themselves. What type of fabric were they made out of? How were they worn? What types of threads were used, or how were they manufactured? Or were they purchased for a specific celebration? So we can learn so much about history from fashion. And so what Passion for Fashion is going to do is really look at these historic versions of these incredible pieces, but then we have current people who are going to make wearable versions of these fashions. So we have stylists, and they're going to come in and really look at everything in the collection, put their own spin on it. We are planning a runway show. So you'll take these modern takes of these great historic fashions, run them down the runway in the first ever runway show at the museum. We're working with a photographer out of New York, Ellen McDermott, who has done wonderful photography for us. And we're just really excited to really bring a lot of these textiles and dresses and fabrics out from our collection center for the public to see. And some of the styles, this wedding dress is really breathtaking. And I think as we look at the change in fashion over time, there's some pieces that are just timeless. And that's what we're really looking to bring out. But by having modern wearable versions of these, I think it's going to connect to people in a really great way. And the shoes are fantastic, so it's really fun to see those.
How has archaeology been a part of Strawbery Banke?
We have this great joke at Strawbery Banke Museum that all you have to do is stick a shovel in the ground and you'll turn up an artifact. And to be more serious about it, though, we have a really wonderful archaeology program. Sheila Charles is our archaeologist here, and every summer she leads a field institute where we have kids as young as 16 joining us right alongside adults, whether you have zero experience with archaeology or if you really have a passion for it. But for the last 2 years, they've been excavating at the Chase House. And this is a house that has incredible history. It started as an orphanage. It has been home to a dentist over the years, a very wealthy family. And what they're specifically excavating is the privy. And so throughout time, anything that a family or the residents didn't want anymore, whether it might be a broken pot, or in the case of what we found this summer was a tooth, anything that needed to be thrown out went down the privy. And we actually have a coal ash lined privy, which is pretty remarkable in itself. And so we look through the layers of materials that have been dumped there throughout the years. And like I mentioned, we had a tooth that was discovered this year, and doing some research found there was a dentist that called the Chase House home, and the incisor that was thrown down the privy was quite decayed, and we're actually sending it off to a forensic dentist to do some more research for us and maybe find out a little bit more about the person that this tooth came from. But it's a great way to learn history about what is in the ground from what people threw out. We know that there was an L on the Chase House and had since been removed, but they dug up and found this summer there was a horseshoe that was placed on the top of the foundation in the corner, and it was done for good luck. So all of these things that we learn is not just about what's above ground or what the stories that were left. A great deal of what we learn at Strawbery Banke Museum is from the ground that these buildings are sitting on. And we really, there's so many wonderful artifacts that we've been able to piece together, whether it's china that would have been brought in on ships here, whether it's toys from the children that called this neighborhood home, or teeth, or any other number of things that are in the ground here. So it's a large part of what we do here at Strawbery Banke.
Could you tell us about the decorative arts in the homes and why they are so important?
We have many wonderful decorative arts here in the homes, and a lot of what I think is visually appealing to people as you come through. You might walk into like the wheelwright house and you see this really loud wallpaper and you think, gosh, didn't really think of people in the 18th century having this desire for really vibrant patterns and colors, but they did. And especially this neighborhood, because it was built on a tidal inlet, they had great access to materials from around the world. So whether they brought in fabrics from France or wallpapers from Europe, or spices or other things that came in, we had great access to things from around the world, including the decorative arts. And so you really see these great fabrics and wallpapers, and you see the carvings and the mantels, and a lot of what has decorated these homes. They're absolutely stunning. You can walk into the Walsh House, and again, it's a very fanciful version of what was sort of in vogue around the world. And these pieces are preserved. We've got great fabrics on the floors and rugs and paintings and decor in the homes, and they're really, really beautiful. And again, it's something that we see. A few years ago, we had, again, it was in the wheelwright house, we have this fabric that's on one of the beds that is sort of a bright red, almost reed-looking plant against its very loud wallpaper that's in the background. And it sort of made the decoration and stylist and home decor blogs, because people were look at this combination of fabrics with wallpaper and how bold it is. And again, it really challenges the notion of, the very bland colors and the very muted decor. And it's really not true. It really depended on the taste of the person in the home.
You have a number of different children's programs. Could you talk about some that we have not covered?
I think the strongest children's program we have is actually our school programs. We have about 10,000 school kids that come to Strawbery Banke Museum every year. So whether they're studying American history or colonial times or something specific, they'll come to the museum. We have a great Thanksgiving program. We have wonderful hearth cooking programs. And the programs are so hands-on and interactive. The kids can try on the clothes, they can make the food, they can really walk through history, look at how are houses built. So they look at the architecture of the house. They might look at a timber frame built house and put together a model. So there's so many different ways that kids can take what they're learning in the classroom and apply it here or see it here. They'll come through and they'll talk to our cooper, and he'll ask them, what holds a barrel together? And they'll think really long and hard about it. And they often laugh when he says, not very much. And so they learn about, modern day, milk jugs or the things that we get our beverages in didn't exist. We didn't have plastic, we didn't have containers. And so they learned about how people moved goods in sacks and kegs and barrels by handling them, by talking to the person who still makes these things. And I think it's a great way for school kids to really connect with history in a way that's meaningful for them and might continue their interest in learning more about it.
It is now December. Your normal operations are from May to October. Currently, you have the Candlelight Stroll. Could you tell us more about this wonderful event?
The Candlelight Stroll is one of our largest signature events. We're celebrating our 31st year of holding this event. We hold it on the first 3 weekends of December, and we take the entire grounds, and they're lit with hundreds of candles lining the lanes and landscapes. We have candles in the windows of the homes, and our historic homes are decorated to the period in which they're interpreted. And so we take a theme each year, and this year it's Once Upon a Winter's Eve. And so everywhere around our 10-acre museum, it's December 24th, but in very different time periods. So you might walk into 1808 at the Aldrich House, or you'll walk into 18th century Harth Smith and the Wheelwright House, or 1919 and the family of the Shapiros is celebrating Hanukkah.
Shalom Aleichem. I'm Sheva Shapiro. I was just talking to some people in the photo gallery so that they could see the pictures of Charles Brown, my nephew, who's in the parlor at 16. And it's a picture of him wearing a boy's dress, because he's 14 months old in the picture. And boys wore dresses in 1908 until they were 4 or 5 years old. And he has pantaloons hanging down below the skirt of it. It's quite cute. And he's dating, I understand, a girl named Gertrude.
A lot of delicious food here.
I do. Amazing. This is potato pancakes called latkes.
Yeah.
That are made in oil to remember the olive oil that burnt in the synagogue in Jerusalem after the Greco-Syrian soldiers had gone home, and the Jews had taken the 9 or 10 Greek idols and put them out in a Greek idol compost pile, and they took out all of the goats and the chickens and the sheep and the pigs that were littering the synagogue to try to defile it. And I'm going to tell you, it was schmutzidig. And so they really were shoveling for several days to get it all back together. And they found that in the Ner Tamid, in the eternal light, was not on. It wasn't burning. So that's very bad, because eternal means forever. And if it's not being lit, it's not doing forever very well.
Right.
So it's not doing its job of being an eternal light.
So you've got this great museum that is holding celebrations, whether it's winter celebrations or holiday traditions, in each of the historic homes. And we have costume role players that invite you into their homes, and they stay in character and welcome you into their celebration. In the Wash House, they are celebrating the christening of their godchild. We have abbots in 1940s who are celebrating the fact that their son is coming home from the war. And so you have all of these families that through time had different celebrations and different reasons and things to celebrate on December 24th. So that's all depicted here. And then we have great traditions. We have a horse-drawn carriage that rolls through the museum, and so people can take part in that age-old tradition of bundling up and riding through the horse and carriage. A great bonfire so people can warm up. We have live music in our cider shed, which during the years where our carpenters work, but for the month of December, we turned it into live music. And so we have great bands like Ballymac or Dick Kaplan's excellent jazz band. So we have these wonderful musicians that come in and play some traditional music, some different music, music that you would hear throughout the holidays in different periods of time.
Let's try it one more time. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. I play the wild rover. No, never. Very good, very good. I'll go home to my parents, confess what I've done, and I'll ask them to pardon their prodigal son. And if they caress me like old times before, sure I never will play the wild rover no more, and it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more.
We have a gingerbread house contest, and so we have people with incredible confectionery talent who have put together these great villages. We have one this year that is a log cabin Christmas that's put together by a Girl Scout troop, and they've done a great job. But we have great hands-on demonstrations. Our Cooper is showing people how they would make casks and barrels and cabinetry work. It's a great age-old tradition. And all throughout the grounds, there's just this great sense of celebrating the holidays. You sort of leave the Christmas shopping and worrying about the holiday meal and everything that's going on, leave it at the gate. And for the few hours that you're here at Strawbery Banke Museum, you can take in the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes of the holidays as they've evolved over 4 centuries. Step back in time. Go and talk to Mr. Walsh or Mrs. Walsh as they celebrate the christening of their godson, the Shapiros as they celebrate Hanukkah, the Chase family as they welcome people into their home. We have Richard Spicer, who is playing the harpsichord and talking about that piece of musical history and why people would pay to have a harpsichord brought over from Europe instead of a very heavy piano. And so throughout the grounds, there's just wonderful history, but it's that interactive history. And I think it's a great family tradition that no matter what your age, what your interest is, there's something to really get excited about here, to enjoy the holidays, you know, the lights, the sounds, the music, you know, to come together with family and friends and take in a different holiday tradition. You know, there's so much here to get through these houses and talk to the role players and to see history. We have St. Nicholas here in the Riderwood house, and between the music and the lights and the sounds and just the ambience of being able to walk down paths that people have walked down for 4 centuries, or to be in homes where people have celebrated Christmas for years and hundreds of years. And in some houses there aren't Christmas trees because there weren't Christmas trees as a tradition at that time period. So you look at what they celebrated and you really learn about what we do today and how that has evolved over the years.
You are also having holiday house tours. How do those differ from the Candlelight Stroll?
The holiday house tours are actually offered during the weekdays, so Monday through Friday. They're done during the days. We start at 10 a.m. and we run through 2 p.m. and it's a 90-minute guided tour. Candlelight Stroll is self-guided. You come through, we hand you a program and a map, and you're on your own to really venture through and to take your time going throughout the grounds. The holiday house tours are for those people who really want a guided experience. So we have very knowledgeable tour guides that guide them through 5 different homes here at Strawbery Banke Museum. And these homes depict very different time periods. And the decorations, therefore, inside the homes are very different. The stories of the people that lived in their homes very different from each other. And so it's a great way to have a knowledgeable tour guide take you through a 90-minute tour of the museum during the day, where the lighting, you know, is a little bit better to see all the different intricacies in the homes, whether you're interested in decorative arts, or maybe you're interested in architecture, or maybe you're interested in horticulture and you want to learn more about how all of these decorations are put together, how they're planted and harvested and dried and put together. So it's a really great way in a smaller group. We take about 20 people per tour. So it's a very intimate experience to be able to walk through the houses, talk to the tour guides, talk to the staff, and see it in a guided experience.
There is so much to experience at Strawbery Banke. Is there anything else our viewers should know about?
I think when you come to Strawbery Banke Museum is to take your time. During the regular season, our ticket is good for 2 days, so you don't have to feel rushed. Coming through Candlelight Stroll, take your time. I think it's a nice opportunity to step back and from the hustle and bustle and the stress of, I think, everyone's everyday lives, and just sort of, you know, go through and to look at the different historic houses. You'll see some things that you might still find in your own home. You know, whether it's from the tables that we take, or, you know, the inclinations that we have for celebrating the holidays and for decorating. A lot of what we have in our homes or traditions that we celebrate have evolved over the years, and not a whole lot of people stop to think about how we got there. One of our interpreters was talking yesterday as she had timed herself as she was grating a cinnamon stick. and it took her over an hour to get a teaspoon of cinnamon. And so really to think about not opening your spice cabinet and opening up your plastic container to bake with, and really just sort of enjoying, I think that the pleasures that we have, the simplicity of the modern conveniences, to be appreciative of those, but also to really think about where our ancestors have come from, where the people that have formed this community have come from. And then what's unique about Strawbery Banke Museum, as it depicts 4 centuries of history, anything that was happening in the country and in the world, in some small part was happening here. Whether it's the Revolutionary War and being the political center at Pitt Tavern, or World War II and ration, stamps, and having to look at rationing food and tin and rubber at the Abbott store. So much of what was happening around the world was affecting the people that lived here. So you can really think about how that history has evolved, and so much of what we have today, there's traditions that have formed from the past, but also what we do today, whether it's the resurgence of victory gardens, or this generation knowing what it's like to live through war, and that there's still those connections to be made to whether it's your parents or your grandparents or the people in your community, that there's so much to learn from the past. And just trying to find your place in this great American story, whether it's the time period of today or what your family has to pass down for stories. If something here sparks a question that starts a conversation with your family, or something that you teach your children, I think it's really just about connecting to history, because that's so important, but more important is using that history to connect to the people around you today.
Thank you very much for talking with us about Strawbery Banke today.
Thank you so much. We're so thrilled to have you here.
What a wonderful way to kick off the holiday season. Be sure to check out the array of things Strawbery Banke has to offer. From everyone at Travelin, we want to wish you happy holidays. We'll see you in the new year, but remember, keep traveling!